2 years with this car. The time really does fly when you sit down and think about it. Over the course of the past 2 years, owning this car has been interesting, I'll put it that way. It's been kind of like a roller coaster ride where I first got the car, my feelings about it and everything were up here, and then I enjoyed it that way for quite a while. But I think the lowest point that I ever had with this car was after the VMP supercharger went on. It wasn't because of the VMP supercharger, it was because it was just an accumulation of all the other things that needed to be worked on the car at the time. I mentioned in a video a little while ago that with the VMP install, it came with the oval single blade throttle body, and that was sticking a lot. So that led to the drivability issues. The car didn't handle that well because of the suspension that was in it, and you take those two factors together, the drivability was pretty bad. And I would say that was my lowest point with the car, and now that those two issues have been resolved, I'm back up here with the car again. There was a time at that very low point with the car that if the right number was thrown at me, I probably really would have considered letting it go. But at the same time, I knew the issues that I was having with it were temporary because they could be fixed, and once they were, things improved tenfold over where it was before. Just owning these cars in general, regardless of what you have done to it, from completely stock to 1,000 horsepower street car, they definitely live up to their reputation that precedes them. I made a video, I believe it was last year, maybe the year before, I think it was last year, of if these cars live up to their reputation, or not to their reputation, but if the cars will meet your expectations. And I'll link that video up above. And not to reiterate that entire video, but just to touch on it a little bit, that if you know what you're getting into with a car like this, one of these 03, 04 Cobras, then you know where your expectation bar is set. And this car definitely ticks off all of those bars where it sits. Granted, these cars are getting older, things have to be replaced, and parts wear out. So if you end up with one of these cars, and you're thinking about how awesome it's going to be because of all the people on YouTube that gush over them and say how great they are, you do have to realize that there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that goes on as far as problems that get fixed or things that need updating that get worn out over time. But you can very easily bring this car on par with something much closer to it in the modern era. When you close that gap of how old the car actually is to how old the car actually acts, it makes it a much better, more enjoyable car to have. The exception, of course, is the cars that mostly sit and are not driven all that much. They don't really wear their parts out to the extent that something like mine would, where it has mileage on it. I like to drive it a lot more than a lot of other people do, but at the same time I go 6 months out of the year without driving it because it's in storage for the winter months, so it kind of equals out between both in the end, most likely. As far as if I would change anything with what I've done with this car since I've had it, it's a kind of a slippery slope. And I mentioned it to one of the subscribers at a car show that we were at one time. I mentioned to him that there are days where I miss the Eaton supercharger on this thing. Even though this thing has gobs of power and gobs of torque, there are still days where having the Eaton on this thing would be pretty nice. I mean, I still have it in my garage. I'm not going to swap it over, but I don't regret doing the VMP. It's an excellent blower, and I really like this car where it is now. I think if you update these cars to bring them up to par with their handling, replacing parts that are worn out, and you put these at the 600 to 700 horsepower range, that is such a great middle ground and sweet spot for these cars to be in. And this is where I have this one now, and I really can't think of any complaints I have with it. It doesn't mean the car is perfect. If you go back and watch the other video that I did about these cars meeting their expectations, you have to realize that it's hard plastic. There are all kinds of creaks and rattles and groans, and the fit and finish on these cars is not the best. You just have to know what the car is going into it, and don't expect more than what the car is going to give you. So how would I sum up my past 2 years with having this car? I would call it an enjoyable experience. There's been ups and downs, there's been problems, there's been some really low times with the car, but overall, I'm really happy with it. I'm glad I have it. I have this very large roadmap of the future with this car and the things that I want to do with it. And it's going to take a long time to get this car to the point where I would consider it a done car, built 100% the way I want it, and there's nothing else to do to it. It's a really long process, and thank you. That's one of the great things about these cars and their current place in history with their current age, is that there's quite a spectrum of different types of owners. Whether it's the straight up collector, where the car is still wrapped and sits in basically a museum or a temperature controlled garage for his lifetime, or it's driven on a more regular basis like with mine. Ones that are mostly garage kept but still occasionally driven. Everyone's experience with a car is going to be different, but whatever someone is using the car for is going to be what they're getting the enjoyment out of it. So, like in my case, I bought this car to drive, to mod, and basically just have fun with it. A nice street-driven car, and I've slowly transformed the car into that over time, to get it to where it is now, more of my vision of where I want this car to be. I think I've gotten over the biggest hurdle with this car as far as its lowest point. So I think everything from this point on is only going to be making the car better and improving on where I want it to be, and make it a more enjoyable street-driven car that I've envisioned for myself with what I want out of this. That is a very nasty and black looking cloud behind me, so I'm glad I'm almost home and almost done filming this video. But let me know in the comments down below, how long have you had your car for, and what's been your overall experience with it? Have you enjoyed every minute of it? Have you had kind of some rough times with it? Because everyone's experience with these cars is going to be different. They do tend to be temperamental, as mine very, very much is, as I've come to find out over the past couple summers. So if you're new here and this is your first video, subscribing would really help the channel out to help it grow. And if you made it this far to the end of the video, make sure to throw it a like. But above all that, thanks for watching.